Okay, are you excited? Okay, then you should give our lecturers a round of applause, and I don't know who's going first. Oh wait, this is so important. Okay, those of you who inside your head just now were like, excellent, now I can go back to playing Minecraft. It's Minecraft, Minesweeper.
No Minecraft.
Okay, fine, Minecraft too. Okay, I have an incentive for you. Are you ready? After tomorrow, I'm going to have 3 questions based on the lecture today. I will select people at random to answer those questions. If you successfully answer the question, you will receive a treat. I do not mean a fake treat like a Jolly Rancher. I mean like a gift card that is like cash money. Yes, I will give you Jolly Ranchers if you really would prefer the Jolly Ranchers to the iTunes gift card.
Yes.
Okay, this is not going to be like who spoke first kinds of questions. These are going to be like, are you paying attention and actually taking notes? It will be an open note trivia question, so you can actually consult your notes. What?
Are you asking everyone and the people who raise their hand?
I will use a variety of methods to generate the person which I will select.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, so if I were you, a little cash money would be much better than trying to break your high score on Minecraft. Okay? Fair. Maybe that wouldn't be so difficult and you could do both, but. Okay, everybody clear? Alright, Brian Kersch.
Hello? First things first, it's actually the schedules have already been printed for you. That's what is up here on the tables. There are lots of things in here because we're not very good at organizing ourselves, which means there's some redundancy. You will come here and pick one of these up. It does not matter if you are a 2-week lab or a 3-week lab at the end of this. They're all the same. Attached are the schedules of where you will be for lecture, what each and every single lab will be in over the next 3 and 2 weeks, and where the lecture rooms are. There may be multiple copies of a given schedule. Ignore it. If you don't know which one represents what, ask a lab leader or talk to other students to figure it out. It's really not absurdly complicated. But all that aside, I'm going to start the lecture now. She talked a lot about how not... Oh, sorry, that's the second thing, is I have a tendency to speak really quickly and not notice I'm doing it. If you get lost, raise your hand. So I'll try to do my best to slow down, but I'm not very good at that, so you'll need to remind me. Yeah. No, don't be scared to raise your hand, but for real, let me know if you get lost. She talked a lot about how not to use Google. That's funny because I'm starting the research lecture with how best to use Google. The first thing we're going to do are learn about the different ways to use the Google search functions as well as the utility involved in them. So first things first, Google.com. All of us have come across a situation when we've been doing research where we come across a website that does not have a given date published, and we don't know what the date is for that website. So you can either do one of 2 things. You can have no date, which kind of sucks whenever you're doing debate work, or there is a JavaScript function which gives you the date. Now, it is super hard to remember JavaScript unless you're a computer nerd. So the first thing that happens on Google whenever you do date last modified is a website that gives you the JavaScript for it. Notice that whenever you copy-paste it, JavaScript : gets lost. You will have to manually reinsert that every time. And pops up a nice little window with the date last modified by the people who run the website. That is your date. Back to Google. There are multiple things with Google that are useful. If you are doing research about things such as... Oh, sorry. Question? I didn't see it. Yeah.
Update that.
Yep.
You just copy the Google thing they give you?
Just date last modified. It brings up a website that has the full JavaScript attached, which includes the JavaScript code. But whenever you copy paste it, notice how the JavaScript colon was lost, like the actual command part. So you have to reinsert the command part each time. Okay.
Hey,
Yes.
where you typing is the browser?
Yes, you type in the URL. Yes.
How do you like get to the specific website?
Yeah, it's the first hit on Google for date last modified. Sorry if that was a little unclear. If you Google 3 words date last modified, it'll be the first website that comes up. It is a very useful tool for doing date work. Okay. Back to the utility of Google. There are several functions of Google itself that make doing research much more targeted than a general research would be. So if you are doing research, if you are in Josh and Sarah's lab about the election that is coming up, Josh, Sarah, and Colin, sorry, the election that is coming up, you don't want to go to Google and be like, Barack Obama election, because you'll get maybe some stuff about the 2008 election, what happened in 2009. So you might want to use the Google News function and come up with Obama election. And obviously we want more targeted searches than like Obama election. So like Obama election, leading points, etc. Talk to lab leaders about specific terms you will use when doing research assignments. But news will come up with the past 3 weeks or so of information as opposed to information all over the internet. If you want research that is recent to something such as oil prices, odds are you'll want news because the difference between Google Normal and Google News for oil prices is astounding. You will get stuff from the 2008 price spikes in the summer if you do just like generic oil prices or rising oil prices. The second thing about Google News is on the left-hand bar, there are ranges of time periods you can use. So if you want something within the last week for how oil prices have been doing within the last week, that's possible. If you want to find a specific piece of evidence that you knew existed sometime in the last month, but it wasn't last week, you can even do custom ranges. The first one is the most recent date, the second one is how far back you're going, or vice versa. From is the first date that you'll use, like you know it was done last month, so May 1st, but you also know it was written before this week, June 18th. Okay. Second function, which may be one that is more useful for especially targeted research, is Google Scholar. On Google, at the top of every bar, even if you're not logged in, like Shelby is, there will be a More button at the very top above everything. If you do any Google search, it won't be on the Google homepage, but if you do any Google search, so ASDF will work for that matter, when you're not logged in. More, even more, Scholar. This will search journals. All published journals, even if you don't have a way to access them, you can then utilize other resources that Colin and Shelby will tell you about how to access them. So here, we might want to look up something like federalism between the states. You get access to economic literature, etc. At the very least, this will find sites for you, even if you aren't able to access the full article itself. You will have the author, the date, the title of articles, and whether or not they're useful, and those can help you do more targeted research whenever you use higher level functions such as the UNT library resources. So Google Scholar is great for finding sites, if not evidence itself. And these are going to be people who have peer-reviewed articles, so you know the quality of their work is going to be higher than that of blog poster on google.com. Yes?
Sorry. I used to use this order before, and sometimes I pay for it, to pay for it.
You will never have to pay for an article from Google Scholar or Google Scholar itself. What you might have to pay for, quote unquote, are the articles themselves because they're in a journal that you don't necessarily have access to. I'm going to try to find one which we don't have access to because UNT has a bunch. And what will happen is it'll tell you, like, you have come to a page that wants you to pay $60 for this article because you don't have access, like this one. They want us to buy it. But what you now have is the name of the article, the authors of the article, and you can use other resources such as EBSCOhost to see if the schools you do have access to it. EBSCOhost, which I think Colin is the one who's going to talk more about that, or Shelby is. searches all of the databases that you have access to see if that article fits. So like I said, at worst it's a site finder, at best it actually gets you the article itself. Yes? You're just stretching? Okay, you're just stretching. The other wonder of Google is sometimes site searches suck. We're going to talk about think tanks here. And there are several different think tanks. There are actually just like infinity of them. But the three main ones for debate are the Cato Institute, CATO, Brookings Institute, and the American Heritage Foundation. Those are three of the largest think tanks that write debate-relevant evidence. Yes?
Repeat that.
Cato, C-A-T-O, Brookings, phonetic, and American Heritage Foundation. Cato Institute is largely a libertarian think tank, which are a group of like-minded people that publish issues, but usually do so from the same political perspective on said issues. The Cato Institute thinks that large government is generally bad and believes that we should devolve authority to the states. So, if you want something about states research or federalism research, Cato is your place to go. Brookings is what most people would consider a left-leaning think tank. So if you want things like support of Obamacare or why Obama winning the election would be a very good thing, Brookings is your place to go. American Heritage Foundation is your traditional right-wing think tank. If you want American hegemony is awesome and we should totally invade other countries / we need to bomb Iran, Heritage. Think tanks are awesome because likewise you have people who have to reach certain levels of qualifications to publish within think tanks, also because it gives you the targeted research you want in terms of political methodologies. And using think tanks, you're going to want to utilize the search functions as opposed to just scouring the website, although it can be totally interesting to just like dig through their websites. You will also find that often they have studies that all contradict each other. So, for example, Brookings would probably have an article about why the minimum wage is awesome for American workers, and the first article on Cato is the negative effect of minimum wage. But that probably will be relevant to any of your research. So you want to use search functions, and the thing about search functions for think tanks is not only do they give you articles for the think tanks themselves, because they're actually published on the website, but they also give you articles by people who think like the think tank does. So if we were to search for transportation, I can't spell, on Cato, the first link it gives you actually isn't to a Cato website. Downsizinggovernment.org probably fits with the Cato methodology, but it's not Cato itself. So it will give you external links to qualified authors that have like-minded individuals who aren't just publishing within the Cato Institute itself. If you want to do more targeted research, unfortunately Cato doesn't have a very strong advanced search function. So Cato is all very generic. That is where Google comes back into play. Because Google has the most awesome function ever, which allows you to only Google results from one site. If you use site : and then type the website, Google will limit your search results to only linking to that web page. Second awesome function that uses this in conjunction is the quotation mark feature. If any of you don't know, whenever you're doing most search engines, if you put something in quotation marks, it finds that entire phrase as opposed to just that word. So if we did infrastructure and banks, it would actually just come up with results for bank, infrastructure, banks that are both within the same article. Put the two words in quotations, and it only comes back with results that have the two words next to each other. Apparently, Cato doesn't have any of those. So if you're doing research for infrastructure banks, that affirmative we put out at the pre-camp, Cato will not be useful. Google searches themselves bring up discussions of infrastructure banks. Not just infrastructure and banks within the same article, but the term of art, infrastructure banks. Likewise, Google also has a function that takes away or limits search results by eliminating something. Say we have infrastructure banks, but we don't really want to read infrastructure banks whenever we're talking about state infrastructure banks. We want to focus on the app itself and not like the state's counterplan. Minus and the word, no space. If you add a space, you've actually rendered the function useless. But the hyphen symbol or the dash, which is actually two hyphens, and then the word. And it also works with quotation marks. So say you want to get rid of the phrase state infrastructure banks. The quotation mark function is also super useful for tracking down sites. Whenever you hear an awesome piece of evidence read by another team, and that other team is just absolutely horrible at letting you know where you get your information from, and they don't provide a URL or the article name or whatever within their site, and you know a certain phrase within a piece of evidence, you can use the quotation mark function to find that specific piece of evidence. So say you know that someone has a piece of evidence that talks about federal investment into infrastructure, but you don't know what the article name is, but you do know the first 5 words of the citation. Can't spell government, apparently. Sometimes it's not enough because a bunch of things have a certain phrase before the interstate highway was completed. So sometimes you have to use other words within the card, and if you just did like infrastructure, it probably wouldn't get you anywhere because that probably would be the same articles. So that's why you want to use multiple quotation functions. Boom. You got 2 hits. You've probably found the piece of evidence that they read. Other times, you might get a URL that is no longer accurate. Say you get a URL that is broken because maybe the article has been taken down, or maybe they forgot to put a period in the right place and you are unable to locate it. Oftentimes, URLs themselves will give you titles of articles if you look closely. Sorry, I'm doing this off my laptop. Page not found. But if you look at the URL, it probably has the title of it, or you can also find misspellings, which I clearly did on purpose. And you can use that to use a Google search to find the article as opposed to just relying upon everyone providing you proper information within the citations. And as always, whenever something comes up with multiple results, use quotation marks when in doubt. Google doesn't want me to go there because apparently it's not a safe site. This also reminds me that you will find the pre-camp files online now. They're at meangreenworkshops.com. Secondhand on Google. Are there any other questions about how to use Google to target your research instead of blanket sweeping searches? Or is there a Google trick that you know about that I didn't tell everyone? Because if not, that's about it for me. Okay. Everybody welcome Shelby Fryer.
Question while Shelby's getting set up. Alex Jablonski, did you show up? Okay. Luis Valle, did you show up? All right, thank you.
All right, so for my section, I'm going to start with evaluating quality web pages that will focus on things like author and source qualifications outside of Google. There are two categories I'm going to cover. The first are blogs. The second is major databases that are going to be available to you at UNT, which is what Kersch kind of talked about within the Google Scholar portion of his lecture. The first part is kind of the basics, right? So quality in terms of evidence and sources means general excellence of standard or level, something that when applied to debate means a higher standard of excellence in terms of evidence. I'm going to assume you would all rather be excellent at debate than subpar, which is probably why you're here for 2, 3, or 4 weeks instead of playing video games at home all summer. So this means you should use these tidbits about qualifications in your research process for the camp files as well as with your school when you go back in the fall. The first part of finding quality research is the source or web page the potential evidence would come from. So Brian covered things like think tanks in Google, and I know it kind of seems like there's not much else out there, but there is for you to take advantage of, especially while you're here in terms of databases that you would normally have to pay for, which is kind of the question that happened during the first portion of the lecture. The first is the blogs, which are free. I know it's kind of seems like they might not be qualified, that blogs aren't particularly credible because anyone can write them. And there are blogs about Harding Justin Bieber, I like Kesha, there are blogs about 9/11 conspiracy theorists. Those probably aren't the ones that you're going to want to use in terms of debate research. And because I'm not really funny, I found this picture about blogs that's kind of funny that says, I have nothing to say, you should blog about it, which are the blogs you want to try and avoid because people will just rant about their day and what it means or what they think, how they think Obama is not an American citizen. These things are not relevant to debate, right? So you want to try and find the blogs that are relevant to debate, which I'm going to help you do today. So some people use the blogging for whatever they want to say, which is what this is saying, but other people estimate different political outcomes on policy implications of things that are relevant to the topic. And some of those people are qualified writers, and their blog will be a source of potential debate evidence, which is kind of the ones that I'm going to show you today. The tips to knowing whether or not a blog is usable in a debate round isn't based on whether or not you think your opponent will take the time to look at your qualifications within your site, which kind of reminds me, if you don't do that, you should, because a lot of people don't really care to look for qualified evidence, and it can really help your speaker points, which a lot of people raised their hand yesterday when they said they hadn't cleared based on speaker points, so that's something you can write down to help you dramatically affect your credibility as a debater and your persuasive appeal in terms of advancing your evidence in the debate round. It'll also help you in terms of providing extra warrants for why your evidence should be preferred. So here are the tips. The first category is appearance. This includes several factors. The first would be website domain. There are blogs you can tell by the name are not credible. Things like Fail Blog, Mrs. Zez Writes Blog, Back of the Napkin Blog, Wonder the name, you can tell it has .dot, Department of Transportation.gov, which means it comes from it's the official blog of the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. The domain kind of gives you a hint that that would be a useful, qualified source as a blog. That would be an official blog that you can use in the future for transportation research. Another good blog that you can use is 538. This blog will help with politics and current events, things like the Obama election. If you're interested in the election society, you should probably write this site down if you've never heard about it. It goes over things like polls and which candidate is advancing, things like the different issues, the different articles about past speeches, and historical tie-ins, etc. That'll help you in the politics debate. And you can click the different links within the blog to kind of target your searches. And if you have a particular side, or if you want to look at how particular lobbies or public opinion would affect elections, there are different search functions within the blog that you can use. You can search by going through and categorizing it up here. And then there's a subcategory down here that you could do. Oh, Texas. Okay. The last example.
Wait. 538 is by Vader, Nate Silver.
Oh yeah, isn't he also the one that did the baseball prediction?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're interested in baseball, which I don't know much about sports, so I'm going to be very brief about this analogy. He predicted some final baseball match, whatever they're called. Yeah. All right. And he was right. Okay. So that's an interesting tidbit to know about 538. Another way that you can tell if a blog is credible is the grammar within the different blog postings, right? So you want to make sure your source is speaking from an educated position, i.e. things like, yo, that transportation probably is whack. It's not something you want to say in a debate round as a part of your evidence. Probably means it's not qualified. Even if a qualified person is saying that, there's no warrant, right? So things like grammar are a good indicator of how the piece of evidence how the quality of the pieces of evidence, the different articles, will progress as you read on. So if the first 5, these are qualified blogs, so they're not going to have yo, I hate politics or something. So that means that if you were to come upon a blog site and you were looking at the grammar, it could be an indicator within the first couple of posts as whether or not you should try searching within the blog. Another blog option to use to kind of cycle through and see which ones are credible, which ones are useful for debate, is the organization of the blog. Some of the factors that increase credibility are supporting data, studies, and additional references that all contribute to the quality of the posting itself and add a persuasive element to the warrants. It also provides different uses for you. You could search the actual study that is referenced in the blog. Sometimes they'll post websites at the end of their blog posting, which means you can search that and see if there's additional related information or articles that you can use. So for example, see they have the option on the side to search within the website. So you could search transportation, infrastructure, spending, kind of see what's going on. And then it takes you, it's kind of the site-specific search Brian did, but from within the blog. And you can use that to kind of go through and find stuff that's specific within that blog that is specific to your search itself. And then within them, there are within the article, there'll be hyperlinks to references that they're using, studies they're using, and you can click on those as additional sources of information for your evidence. Because when you cut a file and you have one card that makes a really good argument, you might want more for later speeches as extensions. So these type of links within the blogs are helpful in expanding your research beyond the basic and first element of file cutting. The final and most important element of having a credible blog is the author who's writing it. The credentials, things like their references and links to a professional page with contact information and a biography. There are a few subsets that make up author credentials. The first would be an educational background. Did they drop out after first grade, or do they have a PhD in infrastructure planning and development? Things like having an educational background alone is a good thing, but if it's within the actual actual subject area of the resolution or the argument you're cutting, that's an even better tidbit to include because it means that they're speaking from a position of knowledge about the evidence you're writing, which you can use as a warrant for why they're specifically credible for this particular argument within your speech. Another element to author credentials that you can look for is work experience. Did they work as, Alex Sonic or something? Or did they work in the field of infrastructure, transportation, or business administration that gives them credibility in a position of knowledge at the base to speak from? Those are things that you can add to your qualifications that you know can help you later on. Besides, oh, go ahead.
I've had a problem with authors before, and it's like you have a whole bunch of authors, and then you're only finding one, like the bio for one author. Can you still only cite that one author?
Like if you have an article from multiple authors, you can only find quals for one of them.
And you can't find the bio for the other authors, but the one author you found is really, really credible, but the other ones you can't find.
Well, in that case, you could look at the source and see if it has particular qualifications. And like for example, if it's from like a peer-reviewed source, which Kersch kind of talks about, if it's from a particular news site that you can cite the qualifications. And if you can't use that, you can look within the article. If it's written by multiple people, it'll divide which chapters or which sections the authors did. And you need to find the author of the section you were cutting from. So if you found the first author, but you're cutting a card from the fifth author, not very helpful. So you want to either use the source qualifications as a fallback or find that specific author. And there are lots of tricks to like author qualifications. If it's not cited at the end, sometimes it's cited at the end of an article, sometimes it's cited at the beginning of an article. And if you can Google the person, you can look within the site itself. Like for example, there'll be a staff section on like every website. So it's usually at the bottom. Right, so you could, so like for example, the main search function of a website, you could search the person's name. I don't know somebody that writes it to the off the top of my head, but you could search their name in the function to find out who they are and and if you do like advanced search functions, you can type usually sometimes by person. So there's an option to like select the author. And so you can do that to kind of see if the site posts something about them. You can also search professional biography business sites like LinkedIn to see if they have an account. The trick is if you go to an external website to look for author qualifications, you need to make sure that it cites their works so you know it's the right person. Because if your author's name is like Alex Johnson, there are probably a lot of Alex Johnsons in the world. And the person with a PhD versus the person who like sits in the basement blogging could be different. So you need a point of reference that says, here's the pieces of work that this person did, and make sure you can connect the two. And then you can use that as a source qualification and author qualification combination to make your card more credible. Did anybody have any, I just covered a couple of the basic blogs that I found, but the different methods for how blogs are credible will help you as you search and find more blogs and see if those are credible because you can apply them during your searches. Does anybody have any questions about the blogging portion of how to determine if a blog is credible?
I know there are a lot of partisan blogs, and some of them are even made by like news agencies. Are those considered credible?
Well, the political blogs can be credible. It would depend on who was